and the producers would be like, you know, and after the take, there they are, just okay. That you like you didn't know if they dug it
or if they were hitting it. Yeah. Hey everyone, this is Russ over at AMS, and today I had the opportunity to sit down with one of my own bass heroes, Nathan East. We talked about his career, we talked about gear from Laney, we talked about his technique, and so much more. We really hope you guys enjoy. Nathan East, come on.
What a song, hey?
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good to be here.
It's a pleasure.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming.
Love the new room. Yeah.
Had a good time at the jam, I hope.
Yeah, no, real good time at the jam, and in here, and where my brothers were born in New Jersey. My grandmother was in Montclair, and my mom taught here in Newark. So
you got some roots.
Yeah, I got some roots right here. It's great.
So I want you to finish this. This is a quote or a phrase that you catch the second half for me. Who's Nathan East? Get me Nathan East.
Get me a young Nathan East. Get me Nathan. No, wait, what is it? Get me a young Nathan East. Who's Nathan East? Okay, one more time. Okay.
Who's Nathan East? Get me Nathan East.
Get me a young Nathan East. Who's Nathan East?
Right, and this is what they call it. I think David Foster had mentioned that.
Right, yeah.
4 stages of a musician.
4 stages of a musician's career.
I struggle to find that you're still not in Get Me Nathan East mode after all these years.
You know what? Once you get into the mode, you know, you just have to keep your blinders on and go to work.
Yeah,
yeah.
And you've been doing. I mean, 2,000 plus albums to your name.
Man, and you know, 40 years goes by like that too.
Yeah,
it's just a blink. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to start with some of the beginnings. I mean, we talk about bass, what you have your upright. I mean, were you piano originally?
Originally, like back in the day, you know, taking piano lessons, you know, as a kid, our whole family did. But yeah, then cello was actually the first instrument. And then in high school, I discovered the bass and never looked back after that.
Yeah, but your bass history is like, I mean, so many people go through their formative years in their teens, where they start really getting into the touring scene and the gigging scene when they're in, like, you know, late teens, 20s. But I mean, you were doing Madison Square Garden at what age?
MSG at 16.
At 16 years old.
Which is amazing, you know.
Yeah.
With Barry White.
Yep.
And he hired a band that I was in that was, you know, playing around San Diego, and we played for the Stax Review. And he said, "Who's that band?" And he hired the whole band to go tour with him.
Yeah.
You know,
is that Power?
And that was Power, yeah.
Okay.
And you know more than I do. But we played, you know, the Apollo Theater, Kennedy Center, Madison Square Garden, and I'm like this 16-year-old kid thinking this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know?
So when you get into the session with, I mean, because you were on not only his touring band, but you were also doing sessions with him as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how did that? I think you coined your term. It's like. BWU?
BWU, Barry White University. Yeah. Because he'd come around and sing the individual parts to all the guys. And then you'd had there's Lee Ritenour, Ray Parker Jr., you know, all the session aces, you know, David T. Walker. And he'd go around and sing a part to you, and he'd come up to me, "Nate, I want you to play Bo, Bo, Bo." You know, and he would actually just sing the part, and then you'd sit there and do that all day, you know, and then everybody would just start adding, and then pretty soon this magical hit is born, you know?
Right?
And very cool.
When you were in the studio with these cats, you're saying Lee Ritenour, and that wasn't like, when did Power because Power was his live touring band, but when did that more or less where you started to go off?
Yeah, what happened was the live situation came before the studio situation. So we were his band, in the early part of the 70s. And then I didn't see him for several years, but then later at the end of the 70s is when I got the call to start going up and recording with him.
Okay.
So I can remember, doing all those songs. The first album, I think, was called A Message Is Love. And I even wrote a song with him that ended up on one of the Love Unlimited Orchestra albums, And the thing is, the first album I recorded, I got home, looked at the field, cracked it open, no names, And he had this thing where I don't want anybody to steal my sound, so he didn't put the musicians' names on the record.
Credits there for the musicians.
So it's like, I was looking at the album by Barry White, cover by Barry White, concept, songs, no musicians,
What year roughly was that?
Like 79.
Okay.
Yeah.
From 79, when did things start to like pick up from Barry White and then start to network and get your name?
Yeah, so it was like sort of from then. I'll remember my first session with Gene Page, who arranged all those songs, Love Theme, Barry White, Philadelphia Freedom, Elton John. He arranged all these great songs by everybody. And they said, if Gene Page calls you and uses you and starts using you, it's worth $250,000 a year.
Wow.
So I remember thinking, oh man, that'd be great. And January 2nd, 1980, Gene called me for a Hertz rent-a-car jingle. And again, I looked at there and there's James Gatson was on drums, Sonny Burke keyboards, Lee Ritenour, Ray Parker Jr. And I remember thinking, I wrote in my diary all these guys. And from then on, he used me just about every day.
You keep the diary after all these years that you
absolutely.
And you look back?
Yeah, I look back. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we did that. And when Kenny Rogers did the song Lady that Lionel Richie wrote for him, that was one of the first #1 records played on. Then we did Endless Love with Lionel and Diana Ross. And so it just started like from then, and pretty good fun. The phones kind of kept ringing. And I remember thinking, okay, let me just see how long I can make this last.
Yeah. Now, you between studio and stage, do you have a preference or?
Yeah, it's pretty much, I like both a lot, because in the studio, you never hear the instrument being, in a better environment,
Sure.
Engineer, it sounds amazing, but then live, you get the live energy. Sometimes the sound isn't as great because you got to fill, an arena, not necessarily made for music. But I love the combo of both of them.
A little bit of both.
And I have a little trick when I'm in the studio. I pretend that I'm playing live, just to give it more of a live feel. And then when I'm playing live, I pretend I'm in the studio to give it more of an accuracy and not be too loose.
So let's talk about that for a second, because one of the things that always strikes me with your playing, even your reputation, is serving the song.
Right.
Right. So this idea of not overplaying, as you're saying, and I didn't know that about your approach. It's like stage for studio, studio for stage.
Right.
I hear some of your bass tracks and I can't help but think and hear such control. Like I'll even think like he's in the pocket. He's not overplaying. He's really serving that song. But then I'll see you live, and it's interesting you say like that you take a little bit. I've seen you with Al Jarreau as an example.
Right,
You did Our Love in London in like '84, right?
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And you're like that. You're dressed up in like the Eddie Murphy, like you look at remember that red leather suit that you used to wear? You got like your white leather
jumpsuit, yeah.
And you are wailing in this. Remember like that particular moment?
I was too excited. That was just one of the things. And in your youth, you don't sometimes you don't think too much about those kind of things. I don't know if I'd wear that now.
It was a good look.
But I was excited to be there. We were at Wembley Arena, and David Sanborn opened up. So there's like all these great. Steve Gadd was playing with Dave Sanborn, and so all these great musicians and just the vibe in the air was great. And I was just completely excited about it.
He cut you loose.
Yeah, exactly. And Al Jarreau's music and his book was one of those books that it was geared toward really playing, like a lot of, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to do the record and play it the same way. He really he really wanted you to step out. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he gave me a lot of room.
But was that mentality or that approach something that you innately had from like out of the gate in terms of holding back and refraining, kind of feeling it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I did, 10,000 hours in clubs and and bars and stuff when I was, but before I hit the road, and so playing live was always fun. I mean, that's kind of what we knew,
Mm-hmm.
And those of us that sat there and watched the Beatles and, got the broom out and pretended you were playing in front of, 50,000 people,
Like Fenn from before.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about the Benson approach? I've heard you do again, going back to live performances,
Yeah.
I've heard you do this whole scatting with what you're playing. Like,
Right.
How did that develop?
Well, George Benson was always, one of the guys I looked, I mean, early on, Wes Montgomery, George Benson, and I listened to those guys. But then when George would sing and play, that I thought, what a great way to articulate your ideas. And it's kind of like this and this are just connected to you when you sing it. And I often, kind of recommend, to some of the young players, just sing along with what you're playing. It just gives you more of an idea of what the song is about and what it needs. And so that was a fun thing to do. Obviously, in starting Fourplay, there was more room for that. It's more of an instrumental situation. And so, but every song that I record and one of these days I'll try to figure out if I could get a count, But every single song is like an opportunity to say, okay, what is the exact right thing to play for this, and kind of learn that in those sessions with Quincy Jones where you're in there in the room with all the top guys and you're making a Michael Jackson record or Patty Austin, James Ingram or something, but you're doing something pretty monumental with great musicians. And, my only mindset is what is the best thing to play right now in this bar for this song. And I'm always thinking to this day, should I start high, end up low, start at the first verse in the high register? I'm thinking, what register is best for this verse? Is best for this chorus? When am I going to move? And Pino Palladino is one of my favorite guys who paints. You can tell he's listening to the lyrics, and then every time you go away, put it and did and you take it. So he found just the genius place to, if you're going to step out, But otherwise, for me, I believe it or not, I like to try to be as invisible as possible. Just be like the foundation, the cement, the concrete with the drummer, where we're just lifting everybody up, and the framework is we're here just to make everybody look better, sound better.
How do you approach the difference between your studio recordings and the live versions, though, themselves?
Yeah, the live versions give you a chance, to step out a little more. And again, Al Jarreau used to say, studio, but now we're all the way live out here. So we had, then you have a chance to step out a little more and kind of react to what people are reacting to. Sure. Which is great. And studio, there's no feedback from anybody except maybe the producer. Yeah. Some of the records we did for Warner Brothers, though, and we would laugh, some of the Ricky Lee Jones and some of the early records, we'd go in there and the producers would be like, and after the take, there they are, just, okay, that you like you didn't know if they dug it
or if they were hating it. Yeah. It could be a little unnerving.
And it's so they, it's one of those things where, obviously live people are getting into it. And so you start to play off the audience a little more. But I love both sides of it a lot, because sometimes I listen to records and we've been going around and playing, along with some of the records. And I think, man, what a great thing to happen in the studio on that one time where everybody just did a take that it's only going to happen one time. And that's what the world gets to hear. Yeah. Get lucky.
Yeah, exactly.
We were so lucky to have Nathan East in the studio. And speaking of getting lucky, be sure to check out our cover of Get Lucky with Nathan himself. Then, for exclusive behind-the-scenes content of what we use to make the jam possible, check the link in the description. And like always, to try the gear out for yourself, head on over to AmericanMusical.com.
and you're in the studio, you know, it's another session. You've done a million sessions, but then why all of a sudden is this one tune just resonate all over the planet?
Yeah, explode.
And you know, just doing your job again. Okay, what's a good part? You know, so.
Well, one reason I asked that question too with the live in the studio was, as an example, was we were talking about 24 Nights earlier,
right?
And the song "Bad Love," which from my understanding, I think the original is actually Pino Palladino.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And your playing on that version is definitely all you. I mean, Pino is a phenomenal. He's one of my favorite bass players as well.
Yeah.
But when you play that live on 24 Nights, you're definitely not saying this is a studio session. You take a completely different approach.
Absolutely, yeah. And with Eric, when you're playing live, every single night is like another adventure, you know. So it's never exactly the same from night to night, you know. So sometimes the solo's getting ready to come and everybody's like, okay, now what's going to happen, you know. And it makes it really interesting for us and fun, and I think for the audience as well to, okay, where are they going to go now, you know, what's the solo? So that was one of those cases where, you know, again, inspired by the audience and just the energy of the live situation, it just takes on a new life of its own.
No, it definitely came through.
Yeah.
The particular album that one is on, which if I'm not mistaken, that's Bad Love, so that would be Behind the Sun? Or no, is that August?
It might be.
Or it's Journeyman. It's Journeyman.
Journeyman,
yes, it's Journeyman.
Yeah. But you just named the first 3 albums that I recorded with Eric.
There you go. So
Behind the
Journeyman,
Sun,
though, that's there's 2 songs that you don't play on. It's Pino Palladino with Bad Love, and I believe Daryl Jones with, I can't recall the name of the tune.
Yeah.
How does that work within those different contexts? Because that was, I mean, it's totally a norm, right? Behind the Sun had Donald Duck Dunn, and you're on there, and like, how does that split end? Is it scheduling?
Behind the Sun was our first encounter with Eric, you know, and Warner Brothers had their guys that they used, so Steve Lukather, Jeff Porcaro, basically Toto, you know. But with Michael Omardian was playing keyboard, Greg Fillinganes, I was kind of part of that team. So Eric, you know, was going to come to L.A. and they said, okay, we got our guys. But Duck Dunn was in his band, you know, so obviously Duck was his guy. He didn't know me, but we met on that album, you know, and then he met, you know, the band with Porcaro, and so we did, you know, these songs like "She's Waiting" and what was that
Forever Man?
Yep. Jeff Porcaro. I mean,
that's you on the recording?
Yeah.
Forever Man?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, because
Donald Duck Dunn's in the music video for that tune.
Right. I think and see, that's the thing. If they're in London and they're shooting the video, okay, who's available?
Yeah, exactly.
You know? But that was because I think when they listed, they just put the names of the people and not the songs.
Right. Right.
But that was one of the first songs we recorded.
Okay, and that's intro through Phil Collins.
Yes. Yeah, and Phil Collins was producing some Eric over in England, and when I flew to do the Philip Bailey album Chinese Wall, we went to a pub out in Guildford, and Phil introduced me to Eric there, and so that'd be fun to do something sometime, you know. And then we met at Live Aid. He was on the stage as I was coming off, and he said, "Hey, nice job. Want to hang out?" You know. So, you know, then we did August. And from August, it was me, Phil Collins, Greg Fillinganes, and Eric in the studio. Tom Dowd was producing. And after the takes, like we would do the takes, and then Greg would throw the headphones, and it was like a live performance almost in the studio. And we were having such a great time. And so Eric's manager came back at the end of those sessions. He says, okay, I have Montreux Jazz Festival, Oslo, and he had like half a dozen dates booked already, Royal Albert Hall. And so everybody said, yeah, good. So 86.
That was when you found out?
So yeah, so we did. That's when we found out, you know, here are the dates. And that was the beginning of our touring situation right after that album. So, and we called it the Heaven Band, you know?
Yeah.
And so we went around Europe, and then pretty soon 6 days at Albert Hall became 12. became 18 nights, and then it was 24 nights.
It's incredible.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
So then 24 nights became an album. But as I look back, it's all like a journeyman, but it's all this big journey that things are taking place in real time, but they're because people are acting in the moment. Eric's manager saw the fun that the quartet was having, and then he immediately got on the phone and had, half a dozen dates already booked for us, and then so same thing with Unplugged. We're doing one of the first Unplugs for MTV, and for Eric, he wanted it to be a real Unplug. It's more than 30 years ago now. But it was, okay, it's going to be upright. It's going to be a
Guild acoustic
bass, and it was going to be a truly an unplugged situation. So little did we know, 2.5 hours at Bray, 30 million albums later, that was going to say, and still, one of the most consequential.
Just re-released it.
He just re-released. I just saw it on the big screen, and it was just so much fun to kind of relive those memories.
Yeah, and I bet. I mean, you're coming. Actually, technically, I believe this is your 40th year.
Yeah,
touring or being with Clapton.
Yeah, exactly. Which is amazing to me, and obviously through all the good times and the bad, the helicopter crash to Stevie Ray, Connor Clapton dying and those things. It's just all part of real time life, where as I look back, I think to myself, you're just in the moment at that time, and you don't realize, that you're, maybe making history.
Yeah. And you've done that multiple times now.
Oh man, it's
I have a lot of those
Well,
moments.
you're in the studio with Michael Jackson, and then
I'm not.
A billion people are going to hear this.
No pressure.
Yes. So, you have to kind of learn to be under pressure, but at the same time, realize that everybody else is under the same pressure.
Yeah, yeah.
And I listen to some of these records back now, and how'd we get through that?
Yeah.
It's like a miracle.
Well, I have one track in particular from Clapton era that I'd like to kind of tee up and pick your brain on where your headspace was at the time with the line, "It's My Father's Eyes."
Yes.
Before we roll that, the one thing that maybe we could even talk about a little bit here is that was a cut song, right, from the Unplugged set from its original airing.
Right.
But in fact, you guys did perform that. I think you did a couple of takes of it. And to my ears, now that it's been released, it's quite different than the actual version that hit the Pilgrim album.
As a matter of fact, there's a section on there. I just remembered it watching the film on the big screen a couple of weeks ago, that it didn't make it to the record version of it, but it was a very cool section, kind of an extended middle section.
Yeah. Fantastic. But again, that line is actually probably one of the most distinct differences between the acoustic version and this. Was that
exactly
is it fair to say reggae-ish type of
exactly reggae-ish, and one of the things I learned from Barry White University too is every song he always looked for the common tone, or some kind of hooky common line that could just be the thing that you hear over and over. So the repetition of that becomes. So even though the chords are changing, that line seems to kind of work through all of the chord changes, and that's another one of the fun things you like to do is see what line, because every song starts to be made up of like these little hooks. And but a very special song, great song.
Did that come after Unplugged or before that particular?
I think that
version
was
of Definitely?
after.
That was after.
Yeah.
So that whole rhythmic feel kind of developed post Go Live on Unplugged. Okay.
And that's a very special song. Again, you know, when I look into my father's eyes, you know, which Eric sort of was remembering how his son looked into his eyes, and it was kind of like, since he didn't look into his father's eyes, you know. So again, a very deep, meaningful piece of music that as you're coming up and playing the parts, you kind of have to honor what's going on spiritually in the song.
Well, it almost like compliments and bookends Tears in Heaven in a way. Tears in Heaven, My Father's Eyes.
Exactly.
Connectivity.
And then there was Circus Left Town was another one of the just very emotional.
Same album, right?
Same album, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about rig rundown here too, what we're playing through today. So maybe you can give me a walkthrough, because this is a pretty exciting development that we're talking about from a partnership with you and Laney.
Yeah, very exciting for me because, you know, throughout my entire career, I've always used, you know, amps that I feel best represent my sound, but I've never had a signature amp or anything, you know. And when I met the good folks from Laney a few years ago, we were sitting around, and then I just did the, what if? and they were very receptive, you know, and they said, well, what if what? You know, I said, first thing, 2 inputs, you know, because I travel with an upright in the Clapton show. We do an acoustic set.
Nice.
And so I play that on upright, and then most of the rest of the set on electric. But in normal circumstances, I have to have an AB box, which is another piece of gear in the signal path.
Yep.
Or trust that the monitor engineer, like the upright, just is going through the monitors, you know, so it's not as full sounding to me.
Sure.
And no amps that I've ever used had 2 inputs. So the first thing we sat down and said 2 inputs, they said, okay, that shouldn't be too hard. But not only did they come up with 2 inputs, they came up with 2 separate outputs. So each input has its own direct box out of the back, and then so many variables and features where we can adjust the balance of the 2 basses coming out of the amplifier, and then each of the outputs has its own set of parameters and controls that the front of house can actually, you know, dial in. So he's happy, I'm happy, and like I say, that's just the tip of the iceberg of what this amp does.
Yeah, I mean, from everything I heard, it sounded like a true collaboration. Many times you end up coming across these signature models, and signature models more often than not can really just mean that someone's name got slapped onto an existing model and it already had been established. And that's about it. Custom color. But this is really something it's definitely more of that partnership synergy.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand, you know, were you playing the Digbits at one point?
And I was playing the DB500.
Okay.
So the single input, 500 watt, love in life.
Sure.
You know, yeah.
But it needs to be said that this is not a 500. This is not just like, you know, again, Nathan East slapped on a 500. First off, this is 1,000, if I'm not mistaken.
1,000 watts, yes.
1,000 watts.
Yeah.
The 2 inputs, these are the type of things that you're calling out as your asks, if you will. And from what I understand, there's a push-pull that allows you to actually blend between the FET and the tube. Yeah,
because you got the FET, which is more of a solid state sound. But now I'm going to go with the tube sound. Of course, it has its own volume. You know, and I can drive that if I want.
Now, with your sound for input 1, do you tend to do a bit of a blend, or do you kind of go more FET, or?
You know, it depends on the gig.
Okay.
And the music and the room.
Yep.
So first thing I do, and another thing I notice people don't do is really try to dial in sound. First thing I do is, what's the room? For in here, it's going to be different than Madison Square Garden.
Yep.
you know, and so I'll dial it in for here. But yeah, this is cool. So that's the sort of the tube emulation part of it, and then, you know, pull that, get the combo of both, which is always nice too. Because I'm one of those guys that can't make up his mind. Do I want the chocolate or the vanilla? So I'll take both.
Sure. And it's quiet.
Very quiet.
You know, you can crank that. I mean, it's reasonably loud right now, but as far
This
as
is
its noise
10 right
floor is
there.
concerned.
Oops. Yeah.
Right. Excuse me.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it
Excuse me,
sounds
yeah.
incredibly quiet in terms of the noise floor.
Yeah.
Do you typically use pedals in anything in your signal chain?
Not generally.
Generally
Yeah,
speaking, okay.
yeah. I kind of like the clean, Guitarist has a pedal, sometimes the keyboard is,
Yeah, sure.
But I kind of like to just keep it pure.
If anything, you might drive it a little bit.
Yeah, little drive and maybe some chorus sometime,
Okay.
But yeah, I usually keep a nice clean tone but this again, we've only gotten this far in the amp.
Exactly.
And we've already.
And actually, we still missed one thing: the trim.
The trim, which is will balance between the two instruments. Upright is usually a lot softer than the electric.
Sure.
So and by the way, we have different colors for each channel, so I know
Have to
which
be able
one
to
I'm
identify.
on. Yeah, and easy to identify.
You foot switch it?
And foot switch as well.
Yep.
Whatever's convenient. A lot of times, if I'm close enough, I just flick the switch.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the blue light, especially for the blues.
Plain blues.
Yeah, exactly. But so the trim is very cool. Input 1, input 2, and FET versus more of a tube emulation or combo of both,
Mm-hmm.
which is before we even get to the bass, mid, and treble.
Yep. Now, how do you typically run your EQ? Because we got a pretty comprehensive, array of options here.
Yeah. I start flat with everything.
Mm-hmm.
I start flat with the bass because I do have I have an EQ in my bass as well. So
Magic box?
Yeah, the Magic Box. Okay, yeah, you know all of it. And those are just the things that over the years I've always tried to work on sound.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make sure the sound is the best it could be. Hi-fi, but live studio. The ballad, R&B, rock. So. This amp became the perfect choice for me because of all the different styles that I play in.
So the scoops options. I mean, there's a multitude of
Right.
different cuts. Do you typically insert that into your signal chain depending on the gig, or are you more or less? I mean, are you running at 12 o'clock noon kind of guy? Like what's?
Yeah, I start at noon, and if digging what I'm hearing, I'm there. And but to have 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock available to me is great too.
And let's push to tilt too.
Yeah, and then of course tilt is one of those things where it depends. Every room is different, and some rooms have more resonation, some have less, and sometimes you're thinking, I like the sound, but if this whole sound had just a little less bottom, so it's not so boomy, subwoofers under the stage or something.
Yep.
So with the tilt, you have a bass clef and a treble clef. So I can just, I can go to treble, meaning I just want a little less bass.
It's the most musical amp ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
Then I can go to, if I want a little more bottom. So if I'm playing chords and I want a little brighter sound, a little more guitaristic, something like that. The tilt comes in really handy. Again, I start at 12 o'clock and then the great thing is now master volume for everything.
Yeah. Which was, again, another difference, too,
Yes.
between that and the Dig Beth, the
Yeah.
500 in particular.
Yeah.
When did you start using, this kind of combination of the 412s and the 212 cabinets?
Yeah, so 4x10
4x10,
and 2x12.
Yep.
Both, again, I can't make up my mind. Let's use both.
Okay, simple as that.
But you'll see on the Clapton gig, and most of my gigs, I'm using 212s.
Okay.
It's easy to set up, get around. It doesn't take up, and I don't need as much stage volume. Just nice hear that nice warm sound.
Yeah.
So, but then this is just dream ideal.
Right.
4x10s. I used to always like that punchy sound of 10-inch speakers.
through.
Especially if I want to. If By the way,
I know that song.
on Get Lucky, I was doing my Bernard Edwards of Chic impersonation, basically.
Very
There's
nice.
Nile Rodgers, and good job, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure and an
Very
honor
nice.
to be playing with you.
As a matter of fact, you're a good MD.
Thanks. So the output section, by the way,
Right.
that
Wow.
is kind of just supporting this whole 410, 212 narrative. It's math. I can't do that. The two outputs, I mean, configuration-wise, you're running both outputs. One's doing the 210, 410. See, I can't do math. 410, one's doing the 212s.
Yeah.
But then you have IRs.
Right, exactly. So the IRs are basically come with my favorite settings for the 410s and 212s.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an app.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
showed me
there's
earlier.
so much technology, and they can do a much better job over at Laney explaining. So if you really have some deep questions, call Laney.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And they'll break it down to you. But the responses from my base are sort of like a one size fits all. I feel like sometimes you need like the Swiss Army knife for all kinds of music. So
Sure.
I'm a jazz, rock, blues, funk, and so I love the fact that you can take the app, go in and look at each output for each bass, and there's 8-band EQ. And you can go in there and just dial it in, and your engineer can do it. You can do it, and I mean, it sounds pretty technical, but it's a great way, and it just lets you dial your tone in exactly what you want.
It was a very accessible user interface.
Very, very. Which I think these days is good, and everybody, most people have a laptop that they'll have with them, USB-C cable in the back. Plugs right in, and there you are now customizing your own sound.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even though it's my signature amp.
Well, you guys are talking about the design aspects of whether it's the cabs or the head itself. From what I understand, even the elements of the 4x10 have some pretty unique design elements. So like on the side, the handles on the side of that cab, I don't know if you noticed this, but it was actually, they're not middle, right? They're actually a little bit lower.
Oh yeah.
So that from an element, if you have two guys or gals who are going to go pick it up,
right,
they're going to be dropping down, and it's going to be more comfortable to lift that up than as if it was in the middle. So Laney's definitely not leaving any stone uncovered in terms of design elements.
No, and even when we did the last Crossroads Festival, it was in the arena, but outside they had an outside stage for some of the younger groups. So my son and I were playing on the outdoor stage. This was in the arena, and my guys just rolled it out because there's wheels on the back. So they just rolled it outside to the outdoor stage. We use this.
Fun fact on the wheels, they actually have two casters, like two casting systems, so that for breakability, if you call, when you drop the actual cabinet, the way that they designed those, instead of cutting deeper into the cabinet itself, there's two, from what I understand, it was, right? Two chassis, so that their durability will actually be able to take that hit. Yeah, like I said, it's no stone uncovered.
They thought of everything, and it was fun to collaborate with a team of people that are so willing and able, of course, and just generous with the okay. Well, what about this? What about this?
Yeah. Well, I'd love for you to do a little demonstration with your upright and whatnot. I think the last thing I wanted to call out in the cab, if I'm not mistaken, too, that is there an ability to turn off the horn?
I think there is, yeah.
On the 4x10, which is just again more custom configurations. But if you would do us the honor, we'd love to hear either a little of electric, a little bit of bass, a little bit of both.
But anyway, as we listen to say I want, I mean that's just beautiful sound right off the bat, and so for instance, this room, this environment, I would just stay with that sound, and if I
we were talking about Dennis Edwards, so we got to go to the Temptations.
Exactly. So that's just a lovely sound. So now, say for instance, now we're getting ready to switch to the upright.
Yes, sir.
And again, we'll get to see if they're balanced. You heard the level of that, and So now, of course, flip of a switch.
Yep.
It's blue. We know we're on that.
Yep.
So from a balance standpoint, because we already balanced it today.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, that sounds a little louder. So I'm just going to bring it down
On the trim.
on the trim.
Amazing Grace.
Exactly. So again, you know, I have my whatever settings I do on here, but again, and we were experimenting with a little bit with the drive on the upright the other day, which it just. If I wanted to probably dial a little less treble.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, you know, so you get the picture. You can pretty much, you know, kind of dial in whatever sound you want for the room, for the type of music.
Yeah.
And but just the fact that I can, you know, have one amp that does all this for both of my instruments is a game changer for me.
That's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're even an electric player who plays an electric and acoustic, it's
Right.
kind of almost, I don't want to say unheard of, but it's not common for you to be able to find a rig that
Right.
can really do both and do both
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and you know, you might have a 6-string that's passive or active, and then
Yep.
you might have a 4-string that's passive active. You know, so any combination of 2 different instruments
Yeah.
that you're playing on the gig
Sure.
is this amp is a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Maybe we could do a demo on the electric. I'd love to hear even, maybe we talk a little bit too about your time with Fourplay.
Oh yeah.
You know, Fourplay to me, it's interesting because how many times over the years do you know session players who want to go off and do their own thing,
Right.
and it might be incredible music,
Right.
but it doesn't go anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
more for them, to
Right.
creativity, their
Yeah.
channel, their outlet. But here you are, you know, you have this successful career with, you know, however many artists and albums, and then you venture off with Bob James and crew
Right.
to get into Fourplay, and that just, I mean, it was the far thing from like, oh, who?
Right. And you couldn't predict what was going to happen, but I think, you know, an instrumental record selling 1.5 million copies is sort of unheard of.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and we basically loved the chemistry of the band. We were recording for Bob James' Grand Piano Canyon album, which is a lovely album, you know, and you could hear like Fourplay being born. Rittenauer, Harvey Mason, Senior, myself, and Bob James, and just that combination. There was a sound, and Bob recognized that, you know, guys, you know, I can get us something here, and he was an executive at Warner's, so we, you know, sight unseen, they signed us. We never imagined that, you know, 30 years later the band's still together,
Yeah.
and just, you know, the response that would take place. You know, we were joking. It was 1990 or 91, and we said we want to be the modern jazz quartet of the 90s. You know, so that was kind of
So it came to
our
fruition.
dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, you know, the first album. Just the response was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one that I'd like to, if we're going to put the Laney to the test.
Okay, let's see.
We'd like to run Bali Run
Okay,
from
great.
first album.
Okay, so let's dial in the sound. I think I'll do a let's drive here. I'll add a little bass. Tilt, I'll go with a little more bottom. I think that's a cool sound.
All right. Sounds
Okay.
good to me.
All right. I love just the moody magic. Yeah.
Bob sets the tone.
Yeah.
want them to stop. That's a beautiful
I love
song.
that song. I love that song. And
Is that your riff that you kind of, did
Yeah.
Bob come up initially with?
yeah, I mean, it's a Bob and Lee collaboration.
Yep.
And then yeah, everybody just starts throwing in bits and pieces. You know, that's another thing I just love about being in the moment where somebody will say, "Hey, what about this?" Okay, I'll play that with you then.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And so the chemistry of the four musicians was really, really a lot of fun.
And the evolution. I mean, you went
Yeah.
from Lee and Chuck.
Lee to Larry Carlton, and Chuck Loeb,
Yep.
and all three great guitar.
There was no schlub among you.
No, exactly. I got to be in a band with like three of the finest guitar players, and Bob James, who used just to live up in Westchester in upstate New York, so we had come visit him here, and then of course Harvey Mason, who was the Herbie Hancock Headhunters, all those great songs, and they did a million sessions and his own solo album. So I was like the luckiest guy in the band. I was going, man, I'm Lee Ritenour, a big fan. Bob James, a big fan. Harvey, played all their songs in clubs.
Yep.
when I was coming through. So like being in a band with the guys was great, and those records are fun because we each write for the record, and whoever's turn it is, you bring in your tune, and then if you get the tune, you pay for dinner that night.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the duration of those albums, were you guys all in the studio together, or as things evolved, did you have to try to do some things remote?
No, always in the studio together. Yeah, just
to get the magic.
To get that magic, to get the chemistry. The first album, we actually sort of got together beforehand and ran the tunes before we even took them in the studio, just to get. We were all kind of getting familiar with each other and the whole technique, but everybody writes, brings in the charts, and then we just go over. So yeah, always in the studio together.
Now Harvey, you said you called him out senior before. Isn't his son also?
Yeah, Harvey Mason Jr. is the CEO of the Grammys and of the Recording Academy.
Right.
So, yeah. And I mean, when we were recording those albums, Harvey Mason Jr. was helping us out, running out, who needs a coffee? But it's funny because I'd, sit in the parking lot, and then he'd have these demos that sounded beautifully and meticulously recorded. And he always had a vision, and everybody knew, oh no, he's going places. But we were lucky. He was going grabbing lunch for us.
That's funny.
And it was amazing.
Speaking of kin, I mean, your son as well.
Yeah. And then, Noah grew up with all that music, Bob James being his godfather, and Greg Gaines being his godfather. So those guys would come over, and so he'd be, he just has an amazing ear, perfect pitch, and now plays Hammond B3 and piano, and we just doing a record together and having the best time.
And that was what I was getting to. So I'd like to hear more about the record too. I mean, what are we going to expect from that?
So, it's basically a father-son duo record, but then, let's add the guitar on one song or mainly a lot of trio songs, a combination of some originals and some of our favorite songs, you know. And we were, one of the tones we released as a single recently was Killer Joe. And matter of fact, as Quincy Jones was still alive, got to hear it.
Oh, okay.
But we asked my buddy Hubert Laws if he'd come in and play flute on it. He played on the original Killer Joe 50 years ago, and he came played on ours, and it sounded amazing. Yeah, Greg Gaines played, so Noah played B3 on that, and so just like all the favorite music that we like to play.
Sure.
So, and we're on our way over to Baden-Baden, Germany, to play at a place called Mr. M's Jazz Club. We did it last year. And we're back this year with a little residency there where they invite musicians from the area, and we do like 3 nights of just a variation of music.
Oh, that's great.
So Eric Marienthal is going to come this year, and last year Randy Brecker came over and played, and we did some skunk funk.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So this is what I'm still amazed at the way music is. People are still trying to figure out, now that the industry has taken on a new, now it's streams, instead of
right, of course,
instead of going to Tower Records, coming out with an armful of
albums,
CDs,
whatever.
CDs, And I love CDs, but I can't even play it in my car anymore or
Same.
my computer.
Nope, same. Disk drive's gone. Exactly.
But we go make CDs. So,
that's right.
But yeah, vinyl and so this is what I love now, and the fact that our kids now, the ones that say, okay, let's see if we can keep the fire going.
Yep.
For music, and regardless of what it takes. I mean, I went to one of their gigs and I said, "Oh man, how much is this gig paying?" "Oh no, we have to pay to."
Right. That sounds about right.
To play
here, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they got the guest list. Okay, you got 50 people coming, so you owe us, $500.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your some of your bass players that you looked up to over the years. Have you ever had the opportunity when you were, playing in front of them, themselves?
Yeah, I mean, like Verdine White from Earth, Wind and Fire is one of my
heroes.
Heroes, yeah. And so we actually we've done a couple of concerts together where I've kind of played with Earth, Wind and Fire, and he said, "Yeah, come on, you got this," And actually, Toto, I was playing with Toto in Europe in about 2010, and we did a co-bill with Earth, Wind and Toto. So they played, and then we went up and played, and there's Verdine in the front row, and I was so excited that I was there, and I'm playing, and I'm doing my running in place, and I tore my Achilles tendon, like right in front of him, So I don't run with a 6-string heavy bass.
Did he immobilize you? Like, right? I mean, did you keep playing?
I kept playing, made it through the end of the song, but I was going, something pretty serious has just happened.
Jeez, wow.
But the show must go on,
Yeah.
And then got off stage, and then by the way, your Achilles is torn, fully torn.
Oh man, that's not necessarily the ideal story to be playing in front of one of your heroes,
in front of your hero, but I don't think he realized, because I just kept going.
Yeah. Oh. Well, I do have one ending question, and we're just going to make it a kind of a funny one, I guess, to throw out there. But I read many years ago in an article, and I still to this day can't find where I read it and if it's true or not. But is it true that you actually played on like a heavy metal album, like a track or on the album or something to that degree?
Yes.
It is.
Yes. I mean, it was sort of, I guess since you read it somewhere, it's probably out there now, but it was a Judas Priest. And, sometimes people have to go to rehab or something like that, but the show must go on.
Yes.
So, and listen, I'm all for, everybody just doing the best they can, being clean, now artists because back in the day, folks used to party. And, so even, a lot of the artists that I work with now have been clean and sober for like decades, which is really, like when you think about a business that people think, oh yeah, I can get in there and then I could just party as hard as I can. But no, you can't. Pretty soon it'll catch up with you. And I've seen a lot of guys that just, I have a lot of friends that just didn't make it. They stayed there and then they didn't make it. So, thankfully, I'm always appreciative when people go, and take the time to go get help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so while he was getting some help, the album was being recorded. Hey, can you come in and play a piece?
That's where I want to pause you, because, like, again, in the heavy metal scene, if that happens in your scenario, I don't know if Nathan East in that arena is like the first on my list of calling, right? So like, how did that end up being where?
That's a really good question.
Right?
Because the few times when I said, you sure you got the right guy? Because even when the Daft Punk called, their music was electronic.
That makes sense to me, though.
Really?
Yes,
okay.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Heavy metal with Judas Priest. And, I don't see you as the top of the list.
And you never know. And I think they had seen some of my, work with Eric or whatever. But they, when I got the call, I think that was right in the middle of my days where literally I was running around LA doing,
everything.
like 30 sessions a week, 28, 30s. Like that's 3-4 a day.
Wow.
Every single day. And like I was ripping and running. And I think it was just like, oh, get that guy.
Yeah.
Do
you remember the name of the album?
And I don't even remember the name of the album because
Because everybody's going to be looking through their Judas Priest catalog.
They couldn't put they said we can't put your name on, and
they Barry Whited you.
Yeah, they Barry Whited me. Those two albums, and so add to the list of albums.
There's only 2,000 plus that we know of.
Exactly. But the thing is it was one of those things where, they were recording, they needed to get it done, and somebody probably said, "Hell, get him while he's going from the record plant to Sunset Sound," or something like that. So we went in there, and it was fun, and they just, we kept it pretty simple, because if I was playing, don't play that. He wouldn't play that. Just keep it. Okay. Not even a slide.
Right.
But it was a fun time, fun challenge, and I always feel like saying got called to play on Bob Dylan's record, and it was Vinnie Colaiuta and myself in there, and he's showing us the songs. So what he would show you, then they say, "You ready? Yeah. Okay, let's record." Now I would try to scribble like that. Then we go to record it. Mm-hmm. It's completely different than what he showed us, and then we'd finish the take, and he'd say, "Okay, that was good. Next." No, wait a second. I barely got through it.
Yeah.
But the thing I love about my job is literally it's A to Z. You go from Wayne Shorter to the ones the most
Shorter's great.
Difficult. Yeah, Chick Corea and most chop busting or whatever.
Got to get you on a Matheny, right? Is that one of the?
That's one of the
hit lists.
Yeah, one of my definite hit lists.
Yeah, Pat watching.
Hey Pat, yeah. No, and a couple times we had it where we definitely do something, because when I go to New York, we used to go up to his house and jam.
Yeah.
And one of my all-time favorite musicians.
No,
but it's a fun journey, fun ride, and I still am as excited when I wake up, every morning as I was, when I was a kid.
Yeah, how great is that?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So.
The power of music. Well, we definitely appreciate your visit and your stop in.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. It's I love this room.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And everybody's been so great and hospitable, and we just had some of the greatest pizza.
Yeah, we did.
Ever. So
excellent.
Huge pleasure.
Thank you again, Nathan.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate it.
Okay, let's record one now.
Big thanks to Nathan East. It was a pleasure to sit down with him, and a big thanks to Laney for setting it all up. For more content like this, make sure you like and subscribe, and head on over to AmericanMusical.com for all your gear needs.